And welcome back to Pastor Plek's podcast. So glad all of you are joining us as we're recording live from Austin, Texas. And with me in studio once again is the one and the only Mr. Robert Huddleston. So glad to have you with us. One of the finest from the Round Rock PD, and we're so glad that you would join us. And you actually had an incredible weekend.
I did. My father-in-law got married, and so me and the family went to, I guess you can call it a vacation, although it wasn't a vacation. It was a high-stressed, lots of arguments, why are my kids the way that they are weekend that culminated in a stress-filled, we need to leave, we're done, thank goodness we're home, ending.
Where did you guys go?
We went to this place called Lost Pines in Bastrop. It's like a resort. Yeah, it's beautiful. But when your kid is not in their crib and your daughter wants everything chocolate related and everybody, like my daughter's 6, she never naps. She napped every day. That's how hard she went. And my son normally naps every day, and he decided to protest when it mattered. And then towards the end, our last day, we're like, you know what? Everybody's super tired. We'll give them a bath in the middle of the day. That way we can just get home and it'll be bedtime. But of course, then the hotel shuts off the water. So,
no.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we're doing maintenance. And I'm like, that's terrific. Cool. Because we found that out when we were all naked in the bathtub, wondering why the water isn't starting. And so, of course, the meltdowns proceed. My daughter's super cold. My son pees everywhere because he's without a diaper, and he just seizes this opportunity to run around the hotel peeing. And me and my wife, I mean, we fought almost every day just because of the stress. And then towards the end, we're just like, hey, can we just reset? Like, we're gonna hug right now, and then everything before this moment doesn't matter. We're able to do that, and we saved it. But it was.
So how long were you there?
We were there Friday and Saturday night and left Sunday morning.
Oh, wow.
Sunday midday.
Yeah, you were toast.
And the kids wouldn't eat because my son, he's 2, and so anytime there's a lot of people around, he's not going to eat.
Right.
But he's also going to be really, really cranky, really, really miserable, and he's going to let you know about it. And so we're literally just trying to force feed him dino nuggets, and he's just like, no. And he spits them out and he runs off all happy. And I'm like, you're only happy right now, but in 5 seconds, you're going to be miserable. Please just eat the nuggets.
Yeah.
No. And then off you go.
It's like there's a desperation involved in feeding children
100%.
Because you know that they're going to scream bloody murder for a straight hour if you do not get protein in them to calm their hangry rage monster.
No, yeah, 100%. And you're pleading. You're just like, I'll give you anything.
Yeah.
What do you want?
What will it take? Yeah. All right. So, as one parent to another, I have been there, and God bless you. Vacations are not actually vacations with children when you go somewhere. They're just taking your children to a different location where they have none of the things they need and doing the work in half the space. So, all right. So let's talk about something else. We're going to go back to your military background, Rob. Really excited about that. Personally, as a military guy myself, I have witnessed a bunch of guys really struggle with the suffering, the battle, the battlefield, the memories. And I wanted us to kind of walk through some of that. And maybe, and again, the Christianity thing might be fairly new from at least Christmas Eve forward. But want to kind of even go back and process through some of the older things that have happened that maybe you haven't been able to look through a Christian lens yet, and maybe help you process that here, because I know it's going to help a ton of people who are listening. I mentioned to you just earlier, I just talked to a guy, a Navy veteran, who lost 7 of his shipmates and all the suicide. And you're just like, how does that happen? And that amount of grief and loss. And so let's talk through some of the grief and loss and the horrors of war. And it really gets down to the question, why, if there is a good God, how can a good God allow bad things to happen to good people? And I think that's the big question that we always kind of wrap our head around. So we'll start with that. But let's just talk about your personal experience, combat, like some of the good people you knew that just got the short end of the stick, so to speak.
Yeah, I think even I struggled with the suicide aspect. It was after, I think it was we lost 4 of my friends in January, and after that, we went back. I was back in our like a shipping connex, but they outfitted out to a house, and you live there. I lived in my shipping connex with 4 other people, and 3 of them were out on mission, and so it was just me, and I was cleaning the 50 caliber machine gun, and just kind of wondering like, what is all this? And I was going down a pretty dark rabbit hole in my mind, and I was like, I think I could just check out right now, and that would be, that'd be okay with me. Like I didn't have a family. I didn't really have, I had my mom and dad, but they're not like, I love them, but I never really considered like that's my family. Like the plan was never like to go home and restart everything and live at home and do all that. Right. But so I was eyeballing my M4 and really thinking about taking care of that. And then a knock on the door came, and it was my platoon sergeant, and he had borrowed my Star Wars DVDs, and he was returning them. And we had built a couch out of wood in this Connex, and so he just, without invitation, because I was like, I might have some big plans here, Sergeant. You probably should leave. But he just sat down on the couch and started watching them. And I'm like, well, I can't eat a bullet with you in the room, so I guess I'll sit down and hang out. We'll see how this goes. Yeah. And we watched them. And then I ended up, like I'd always watched Star Wars, but I ended up watching them, like really watching them. And I watched all 6 back to back. He left after like the second one, and it kind of got me through that moment. Right. He had never hung out with me before. I don't know why he came in that day, and I don't know why he sat down on the couch. Like, I think I was 70% ready to go that day. And I know why he came now. It's wild how it's kind of looking back. You don't know that God's been orchestrating something in your life that whole time through. And that's where just God's presence, God's love, God's grace. Even this is where it's wild, because it's not like you were like a professing Christian at the point. You're like I'm out. And so I feel like that's where we sometimes can miss that God has a specific plan and purpose. And I think when you can see it so clearly, and it's hard to see it without having direct revelation from God that you are his child. So therefore, you look back over your entire life and you're able to see, oh, that's how he carried me, right? Remember that Footprints in the Sand poem that I think everyone references. You don't see it until you go, oh, I didn't even know, I wasn't thinking about God at that point, but God was thinking about me. So I think that that's important for anyone sort of going through a struggle, is that you may not even, and maybe someone you know at this point, you may not even realize that God is thinking about you when you're not thinking about him. You're just thinking about oblivion. This is too hard. I can't deal with this. And so I think that's an important sort of reality to sort of check into. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about really the dreams. I don't. This is something that I feel like is fairly common among soldiers. Let's talk through, what was the dreams like that you had when you were in combat? I still have dreams now. I don't nap. I sleep very little. I probably get, because of the kids and stuff, I get about 5 hours of sleep a night. But I don't nap for the very specific reason of, when I do nap, that's when I remember my dreams. And I always have like a panic-stricken chest hurt. I wake up not happy of base is under attack and I don't have my weapon. And it's been 20 years. I still will have that dream if I nap, that I can't find my weapon, and I will wake up with such anxiety and fear, and like I'll immediately need to go to my wife or something and just be like, hey, we're good, everything's fine. But I'm not right now. Right. Oh, that's good. Yeah, I think for me, I would have a repeated dream over and over again, and it was, so my tank blew up once. I had a double stacked Chinese anti-tank mine, and I gotten hit like 6 or 7 times, but that was the one time it literally lifted the tank off the ground. I saw smoke and fire go past my face, and I could like taste that acrid gunpowder taste. And so I'd have that dream, and instead of it being fine like it was, everybody was engulfed in flames, and I would just see charred people all over the place, and I'd be like, that's weird. Everybody's dead. And I would have that dream over and over and over. And the odd thing for me, and again, this is just my
experience is I didn't feel a sense of fear. I felt a sense of peace, that although there was death all around me, I was going to be fine in some way. And so that was my experience with it. It was just odd. It was like everybody was dead. The person that I thought of the most, and that was my executive officer, I just saw him dead. And I was like, I hope he doesn't die. And he lived, so that was good. But I think for a lot of guys, they have the same reoccurring nightmare. The other dream that I have is I always go back to Ranger School, which is sort of weird. I don't go to war, I go to Ranger School. And it's a TA-50 inspection.
Oh, God, yes.
And I don't have something.
That's a nightmare.
Okay, so this one time, I'll never forget this. I was in the mountains.
Okay.
And we did a TA-50 layout that was an impromptu kind of thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I couldn't find my compass. And I'm like, I'm screwed. And I was like, God, you got to come through for me. And just as the RI, the ranger instructor, was about to come check out my poncho liner, we put all the stuff on. My one of the soldiers who's from the 82nd Airborne, he came from behind me, grabbed my hand, put a compass in it, and I looked down. I mean, it was like it was like the Lord had come through, and I go, yes. And it was wild. I mean, like, I'll never forget that. I mean,
Ranger buddies.
Oh man, that was clutch. Wild,
You're
right?
about to have a real bad day.
Real bad day. And because I was thinking I'm going to get recycled and be stuck here. Yes. Recycle, you start over.
Start all over.
Oh, yeah. Like, it's over. Like,
Ranger Creed, your care of equipment shall set the example for others to follow.
Yep.
If you don't have it, it means
You're
you didn't
done.
care about it. So you might as well not care about your Ranger buddy because you just killed him.
You just killed your entire platoon. Yeah. So honestly, that for me was like, I still have that dream, and only in the dream it's like I don't have it, and I'm looking for it, and I can't find it, and oh my gosh. Anyway, so I think it's so weird that like it was. Sometimes I have dreams about being at West Point, and I'm trying to shine my shoes, and I can't find my polish. Anyway, so like those are sort of the dreams I have now, but the dreams I had in combat that were the repetitive ones was everyone being dead all around me. And there was one night in specifically that sort of really. Haunted's the right word, but it really freaked me out. You remember the Crow, right? So the remote controlled 50 cal. So we had just gotten it, and so we thought we were really special. We had an OP that was working on the Crow, and it broke down for whatever reason. I had an armor sergeant coming in explaining why the Crow's not working and blah blah blah. Well, it's like you remember all the details of stuff like this. So as he's explaining it, boom! I hear like the whole building shakes, and I can see off a cloud of smoke in the distance. And I'm like, oh man! I remember Murphy was on the radio. I go, hey Murphy, what's on the radio, man? And he's like, and he was calling out to a baker company who was working along. They were attached to us. A different infantry company would be attached to me at a month at a time. So I'd rotate. Gator. Alpha Company, Baker Company, and Charlie Company. Which is weird that it was not Bravo Company, but they used old. They used old call signs from World War II. Anyway, so Baker Company's out there and they get hit, so they call out to see if everyone was okay. Well, about 20 minutes before that, another bomb had gone off, and I had sent, I'll never forget, Jason Piska. I said, he calls in, he's like, sir, do you want us to go investigate? And I'm like, and I remember sitting there, like, you have like a million thoughts in like a half a second. Yeah. And the thoughts were, it's May. We go home in July. Is it really worth going and chasing down every stupid bomb that goes off? Is it really important for me to put these guys' lives at risk? I mean, do we really need to do this? And then I just remembered, no, the Pennsylvania National Guard is coming to replace us. And if we don't go after bad guys when they inflict, they are going to get hammered. And they did get hammered. Those guys... Man, Pennsylvania National Guard came in to replace us, and they were reserves, and they were twice our age, and it was like I felt so bad for them. Anyway, so I remember making the decision. I know there's a risk, but I mean, we've gone and looked after bombs a million times, and we found nothing. And so I send in the squad, which is 2 trucks, so 10 guys. and they drive into the cemetery, which is where all the the guys would hide. And you're always looking for a line of sight to where the bomb exploded.
Exactly.
So you're looking for, and one is so that there might be somebody with Overwatch with the sniper rifle, but more likely someone's clacked it off at the line of sight to do that. And so, and they have to video it.
Yeah.
Because that's how they pay, they sell it to Al Jazeera or whatever. So I give them instructions. You're looking for an observation point, which has direct line of sight to where the bomb went off. And that's where we're going to go and search. So I start going into the cemetery, and that's when that explosion hits, and my heart just sinks, and I'm like, oh no. It was like, because the first one was like not that bad, but this was like boom.
Yeah.
And so they kind of say, we got 2 casualties. I get out there and I rush out there as fast as I can, and they're just zipping up body bags, and I'm like, hey, hold on. My medic, I said, hold on, Sergeant, let me take it. I kind of just paused, unzipped the body bag, and their faces were just gray. It was just like gone. And I just remember zipping that up and going to the next one, just kind of like processing the fact that I just lost this guy. And it was just painful. I mean, painful. And so we had that memorial service. Gosh, was it that night? Must have been that night. And because it was on Mother's Day, that's what made it also awful. And so I'm back, we're at the memorial service, and I hug. So, we kind of had those guys on loan to us, and that's why it was such a weird sort of dynamic. I felt a real personal closeness with them because I'm running around the battlefield with these guys, and they got my 6, I got their 6, that kind of thing. And I go to the commander and first sergeant, and I go, I'm so sorry. and I just started crying and, weeping and just for that commander to go, it's okay. Kind of like, it's not your fault. Like that kind of stuff. And I was really struggling with that, honestly, because I really felt like it was my fault. I told those guys to go in there, and I'm responsible for, that. They were under my care. And so I go back to the barracks after the memorial and just feeling down. And I open up my Bible. I think it was Matthew 10:28. A sparrow doesn't fall to the ground apart from my Father's will, and you're worth more than many sparrows. And that to me was like sort of like one of the most, Matthew 10:29-31. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny, yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside of your Father's will. And even the very hairs of your head are numbered, so don't be afraid, you're worth more than many sparrows. And so I was like, if God is in charge of the lifespan of sparrows, then he's ultimately in charge of the lifespan of these men, and I can't carry that guilt, or I can't carry that weight of everybody's life that's here, or else I would be crippled from doing the job of battle. And I think that's part of being a warrior. And I think that for me became something that was really special, is that God is in if he's sovereign and he's in control, he had complete control even over that. Now, so that brought me great peace. Has there been anything like that for you where maybe you haven't, like there's some stuff that happened and you haven't been able to wrestle through it well, or like you're still sort of struggling with knowing what might happen or what happened? I
don't as much struggle with it as much as I see like my sergeant coming in and taking up my time so I don't kill myself. Like I look back at moments like that now and be like, well, he came because God put him there.
Right.
Like he made that happen. And all the moments of all the bad things that happen, I can't see what God sees.
Right.
He has his plan for he keeps it all in control. He has his plan for everybody. So me being there and those people dying and what their families go through and how their deaths changed me and all the sorrow that I have and the families have and all the struggles. At the time, I could never see the point in that. But now, as I come to know God, I understand that it's such a big and complicated plan. I'll never understand it.
Right.
But I need to not be selfish. That wasn't done to me. That happened so that everybody can grow from it and learn from it in the way he wants them to learn and grow from it. And I think I struggled with it before because I was very selfish. I'm like, why would he do that to my friends? Why would he make me feel this way? He can't be existing. But like, no, the plan is so big. like a bird can never understand the politics of America.
Right.
I can never understand God's plan. Like,
Right.
it's just not in my mental capacity. And
Right.
I've now learned to accept that. And I see it plain as day. Like, no, that's a bigger plan than I'll ever be able to contemplate.
So along those lines, I got a question in on the podcast from our listeners. So thank you so much. By the way, if you want to text in any question on this subject or beyond, text 737-231-0605. We would love to respond to it. And this is an interesting question that sort of fits in here because I think this is the next place where you go. Since God has the elect, meaning elect can't lose their salvation, why would he create the people he wouldn't be electing? And they gave off a bunch of verses. Romans 8:33, who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Luke 18:6-8. And the Lord said, hear what the unrighteous judge says, and will not God give justice to his elect who cry out to him day and night? Will he delay long over them? I tell you, he will give justice to them speedily. Nevertheless, when the Son of Man returns, will he find faith on the earth? And so I like those questions because what they're saying, and one more, to those who have been called, who are loved in God the Father and God the Father and kept for Jesus Christ. Meaning there are people that are chosen by God, which means there are people who are not elect. Mm-hmm. And so I think the person is saying, like, it's understandable if you suffer, if ultimately heaven is your home, but it's a hard thing to wrap your head around. Why suffering? Why pain? And especially, why create people that you wouldn't elect? And I think this gets into, and now I'm back to the free will of man piece of this. And I think you and I we had some long discussion on this, I think at a First Watch when we had breakfast.
Yeah.
But it's essentially this thought, like if God creates the only thing an all-powerful being can do to truly give another free will is to have the ability for them to choose not him.
Yes.
To be able to have that choice. Well, what happened is that Adam and Eve chose to not go with God, and that infected Adam acting as the federal head. He was the head of the entire human race. Oddly, even though Eve sinned first, it was Adam's sin that spread to all mankind. Okay, so that's sort of a wild thing to think about. What that means is that all are destined for hell. And so it's not, so God knew, and this is where we're getting into we've talked about this before, and this is super nerdy stuff of superlapsarianism. All right, so that superlapsarianism is before God thought of the fall of man, Adam and Eve's sin, he thought who he would save and not save, meaning, I know, I'm going to create people. I'm going to choose these people for heaven, these people for hell. The way that I'll orchestrate them going to hell is the fall, and that will make it all right. There's another view. It's like, I'm not going to think about who's going to be with me forever. I'm going to just give the real gift of free choice to human beings. And then after he thinks of that, the realization, I don't know if there's a realization for God because he's perfect, but then the thought is, to whenever I create humans that are vulnerable and can choose me or not choose me, they're going to not choose me. And how do I gather those people back together? Because ultimately they will be lost because they will not choose me. And so when God comes in and chooses the elect, it's unfair. Here's what I mean by that. And this is where I use this with my kids all the time. Life's not fair. It is unfair for God to save anyone because his son, who was perfect, died on the cross, took on the sins of all of us. And so that was completely unfair. So to ask the question, why did God create elect people and non-elect people? He didn't. God created people, and then they chose to be not with God. They chose to rebel, and then he chose some to save, and so therefore the non-elect or unsaved people, it's the fair thing is that everyone goes to hell. The unfair thing is that some go to heaven. And I think that can be it's a way to look at it that I think, at least from my mind, solves the problem of God, how can you be just? Yeah. How does that sit for you when I say that?
Like ultimate free will is what gives us the choice of like, I choose to believe.
Right.
Like I believe he created us. I believe I believe in that free will to choose to believe or not.
Right.
Or not. And if you don't, well, then we need to get out there and try to save you. Like that's kind of.
And we don't know.
Yeah.
Right.
And and it's not like he created bad things. He created free will, and those people chose poorly.
Right.
And so it's not really, I mean, it's his plan, but it's also, he didn't directly make them bad. So it's not on him.
Exactly. Yeah. So God allowed sin, because if he doesn't allow sin, then you actually don't have the free will to choose. And this gets into an odd moment of like, who are the only ones that had actual pure free will? It would have been Adam and Eve, because after Adam and Eve, everyone had the will only to sin because you were a slave to sin. But when you are born again, now you actually have the ability to choose the spiritual right over the spirit or over the evil. Whereas before that, all you can choose is evil. Anyway, but you still have choices that you're still held accountable for, which is just wild. All right, second part of this question. It's kind of odd that I feel like this fits. When Jesus died for all sins, did he die for just the elect's sins? If he died for the elect and non-elect, wouldn't that be a waste of Jesus' blood? I know he's already in pain and already bearing all our sin, but why bear sin that you don't have to, if it'll be for nothing?
Because he's perfect.
Because he's perfect.
And you don't. If you're a good person, you don't choose like, well, I'm not going to save the bad people. You get out in front of all of it because you know your bigger purpose.
That's right. So I look at it like this: Jesus' blood was sufficient for all, effective for some. And so again, going back, I think this is the part where people want to mince words, but they don't understand what is fair is hell for everyone. What is unfair is Jesus saying, I choose you. I'm going to reveal myself to you. Come and enjoy my presence, my power, and the freedom from sin and a glorified body. Enjoy all that. So I hope that helps that person wrap their head around that. But going back to kind of what we were thinking about just with war and combat, and I love how the one story you go to was a place where you were at like, I'm thinking suicide. I'm thinking I'm going to end it all here. Was there ever a point at which you saw the suffering of another soldier? Maybe they didn't die, perhaps, but that you saw, man, that's hard. Like, for one of the things that was tough for me is, as a commander, is many of my men, because we came from Korea, so they married Russian women.
Yes. Yes, they do.
I don't know if you had a lot of Russian wives in your...
no Russian wives, but we heard the Korean stories.
Yeah. So like we had a ton of that. And so they wanted to marry a rich American soldier because that would free them from the poverty of Russia. Yep. And they were promised all sorts of stuff, that they would be models when they came to Korea. And they ended up working at a bar in a soldier's area. And that soldier had to essentially buy their freedom.
Yeah.
And then eventually they got out of that and they moved to Hawaii thinking, I can now live in Hawaii. And they had wanted nothing to do with their husband that was in Iraq fighting for freedom.
Yeah.
And that walking them through their divorces of just the unbelievable heartbreak of guys just like, she didn't actually love me. I was her meal ticket. I was her ticket out of
money.
Yeah, she did. Did you ever have to deal with anything like that?
With my company, with all the loss, we were really super close.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't let that happen to any of us. We all kind of agreed at the end of it that like we saw so much death that to end it ourselves at this point would be such a disrespect to the ones that didn't get that choice, that they were murdered.
Oh, nice.
And so we very much were just like, we can't. Like, that's how I've always seen it. It's just like...
So when you would walk through with somebody would have something, they'd lose somebody and they're like, I can't keep going. Your response was, I'm not going to let you do that.
Yeah, like you can't. You can't. Like, because all the sorrow you're feeling is something that the guys that you served with who didn't get to choose, that are dead now, they would love to feel anything.
Right.
Because they're dead. Their parents will take their dead son's worst day over the non-future they have.
Right.
And so we owe it to them to keep each other up, keep each other accountable, and to not give in to that ultimate sorrow that you can work through.
That's good. How about this? Was there ever a point of watching somebody suffer? Like it was maybe something at home, maybe the divorce at home, maybe it was the kids struggling at home and then them not being able to be there. Did that ever affect you? Or was that not something that you sort of saw? Because a lot of the guys in your unit were pretty young.
Yes. One thing that kind of affected me is I'd been out for a second and I was living in Berkeley. And I had a workout buddy named Joel.
Yeah.
And Joel was older than me. He wasn't in the service or anything, but he was struggling with depression. He was an ex-heroin addict.
Wow.
Ex-model. He had abs. And I remember he tried to kill himself the first time. And I remember visiting him in the hospital. I gave him a big kiss on the forehead. I'm like, you are so stupid. You have abs. You can't die with abs. Like that's a disservice to the world. I'm trying to get abs. We're going to the gym every day. Here you are trying to take yourself out. Dude, you've made it. Like, don't. And I would tell him about the war stuff and how like, dude, you can't, and trying to like, tell him like, we owe it to people who've died before us to not give in.
Yeah.
Like we can't give up feeling when they've lost that choice.
Yeah. He
ultimately did end up killing himself and I had to kick down his door and find him. And I realized like my message never hit him. And I was like, I wonder if it's because he didn't serve, he didn't lose. Because that message would hit with my soldiers, with my guys. And I remember really struggling with that. Like, why couldn't I get through to him? I'd already lost a handful of friends to suicide and suicide attempts. So trying to get to him, I felt like I failed in that regard. And he still had abs. I'm still annoyed about that, Joel,
I appreciate that. That gets back to kind of what we were talking about with Ecclesiastes. Like, you can have it all. You can have the body you always dreamed of, and that is not it.
No.
Like, I remember my wife and I, when we were first married, and like, when you're first married, your body is at its peak.
Yes.
Right. Like, and like, she was like, at that point, she's like, stop, you're looking at me and you don't think I'm beautiful or you don't think I'm pretty. I'm like, I remember going, what is she talking about? And now it's fun to kind of, and she looks back at those days. She's like, gosh, I was really pretty. I was like, you still are. What is wrong with you? Anyway, it's just a part of life. I feel like I think when you sort of have like this reality, like you never have arrived. Like there's never a place that's ever going to be good enough, which is why the gospel of grace is so powerful. You will never, this is where I think I kind of went off on this on a sermon not long ago. You are that bad. It's like, you are that ugly. You are that, fill in the thing that is so bad about you. You are that bad, but God is that good. And that when Christ is in you, the hope of glory isn't you. Because if it was, it would be exhausting. Because how hard do you have to work to keep those abs, for crying out loud? So hard you just want to die.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, but when Jesus, the hope of glory, is inside you, it's like I have the living God inside of me, and it's that hope that drives everything else. And so anyway, I feel like I could preach a while on that one.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. All right. So any other final thoughts on battling the suffering of life?
The suffering is never, how would I say it? You are going to suffer. And, I feel like that through suffering is what made me realize there is a God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like it's hard to go through easy times and realize you need somebody.
Yeah.
Like it's easy. So you're not even thinking about it. You're in the moment. Everything is great. Everything is perfect. But when it's not, and you realize just how alone you are, if you don't have a belief, then you are truly alone.
Yeah.
And it was during my alone times with my son in the hospital or during the war, trying to contemplate it all, or especially now with how hard the academy was and police work, I realized like I couldn't have survived that had I not believed that I'm not alone, that hole in me has been filled with God and my belief in him and his overall plan and purpose for me. And so I'm never truly alone. And you're only going to figure that out when you need him. And that's a poor place to start any relationship. You should really try to nurture that before you need it.
Yeah, man. Appreciate that, Rob. Hey, man, Rob, thanks so much for being on the show. Absolutely. And we're looking for many shows to the future that you'll be joining us for. I think my final thought of just suffering is that you don't recognize how gracious God is until you've endured a little bit of pain. And I think that to understand what hell would be like is to understand like that pain that you've experienced for eternity, that loneliness you've ever, been on the bathroom floor crying your brains out because you just had your heart broken. It's that for eternity. And I think that when you can wrap your head around that and how much God loves you and he wants to have a relationship with you and you don't have to experience that if you don't want to, you can have the joy of Jesus. So I just want to throw that out there to you that sometimes suffering is essential, and it's actually one of the greatest gifts that God can give you so that you can grow closer to him, even when it's something very poignant and painful that you go through. So, hey, listen, thank you so much for listening. From our house to yours, have an awesome week of worship.